sunk in vehemence above all violence more than Corybant. To our Achaean god, Absinthe. Thy red lips and its green glint, its wavy splendor, and the dance thy belly weaves, triple hint of hell and Algiers and France. Judas love, this flask will drain, kiss hard, and so to bed again. Aleister Crowley, 1898. They draw the shining god into the land in nets. They build a fire to the Lord of Fire. Cry in hallowed words, even the dreadful curse. Amri, Maratza, Maratza, Atman, Deona, Astatsa, Maratza, Maritza, Maran. Oh, look who it is. It's CM. Oh, did somebody just rip a fart? It's the mathematician. Hey, mathematician, I bet you can't even do 1 divided by 0. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was talking about with Steve Bannon. Okay, this is called Aleister Crowley and the Fish. The Fish, which here makes its debut in print, was a novel commenced by Aleister Crowley at a particularly turbulent point of an already tumultuous life. Given the circumstances, it is hardly surprising that The Fish was never completed. A brief summary of the salient facts of the last months of 1920 on 14th of October. Crowley's daughter Anne Leah Puppy died. The record of the Abbey of Thelema confirms that Crowley grieved intensely. Puppy's mother, Leah Herzig, Alastrel, the Scarlet Woman, who was 3 months pregnant, miscarried 6 days after the death. Herzig insisted that the jealousy and ill will of Nineti Shumway, Nifra, Soror, Cyprus, another resident of the Abbey who was 8 months pregnant with Crowley's daughter Astarte Lulu Panthea, had caused both tragedies. Crowley concurred and formally expelled Shumway from the Abbey on 5th of November. She would return in good graces with daughter early the following year. On 21st November, Cecil Frederick Russell Frater Genestai, who had first met Crowley in New York in 1918, arrived at the Abbey. Russell was at that point a neophyte of the AA, Astrum Argentium, or Silver Star, and a master magician of the Ordo Templi Orientis, the former being a mystical and magical society founded by Crowley in 1907, the latter a magical sodality with Masonic elements, of which Crowley was Supreme Holy King of Ireland, Iona, and all the Britons. He became the worldwide outer head of the order in 1922. Russell would prove to be one of Crowley's most gifted and recalcitrant disciples. On 27th November, Crowley sought oracles from Thelema, the Yi King, and the Tarot to guide him in the fashioning of the Cephalodium working, which took its name from the mighty rock of Cephalodium, which lay to the north of the Sicilian town of Cephalo. Were the Abbey a modest, single-story house whitewashed without efflorescently muraled by Crowley within was located. On 1st of December, Wednesday, the day of Mercury, Crowley, Herzig, and Russell ceremonially affixed the signatures to the oath of the working after a banquet of fish and yellow wine. The menu was chosen because of its suitability for the dominantly mercurial nature of the cephalodium working. Fish in particular matched the mood at the time of Crowley the Magus of the AA, as Crowley explained in 777, his compendium of magical and mystical symbolism. All fish are sacred to Mercury because of their swiftness, their cold-bloodedness, the gleaming white or iridescent colors which are characteristic of their scales, and to some extent to the method of reproduction. In the book of the Cephalodium working, Crowley describes his inward response when Tahuti Mercury was invoked in the great magical circle by Frater Genestai on 27th of November of 1920. Thus was Tahuti manifest in the mind of the beast like light therein, clear, icy, winning without heart. At 11 o'clock on the night of 28th November, it is specified to the beast work under the Scarlet Woman. His work to make the great operation of the right. And the primary purpose of the Cephalodium working was to establish the rule of law. In particular, to spell the completion by Crowley of its accompanying comments and thereafter to publish the law, as commanded by the book of the law. The subsequent verse had declared reassuringly the work of the comment. It is easy and headed, burning in thy heart shall make swiftest shall I pen. But here was a prophecy that Crowley could not fulfill. Never in his life was he satisfied with his efforts in the various drafts of his comment on the law. Indeed, the book of the Cephalodium working explicitly records Crowley's sense of failure. On that score, although he diligently achieved his labors of art. In the 28th November sexual magic did stimulate what might seem to be a fascinating diversion from the expressive rule of the Cephalodium into a novel fragment which you now hold in your hands. As Crowley described in the book of the Cephalodium working, immediately was the beast inspired to writing. Concurring, set out upon the fish. Thus wrote he some 14 or 15 hours after that stint Crowley renewed his labors. On 2nd December went out on with my fish story, which by the way is the blasting of the moon tower of the Jesus Trinity. In fact, such thoughts had been known through his mind since his arrival at the Abbey. Back in 1920, he had called in his accompaniment by Leah. He noted that the man's tribe, David Tell, was disappointed that they had not eaten any of the dish's fortune ingredients, and specifically on the account, including one which was some preparation of fish. As they were leaving the restaurant, he found a placard which said, "Pelican's milk, ass's milk." This led to Crowley rationalizing in his dream whether the ass should not be a symbol of some high degree of initiation, as the pelican is of another not so high. His thoughts then wandered into all sorts of reflections about the sacred ass of Priapus, or Dionysus, or Jesus, who succeeded in making him. That evening, Crowley continued in his diary. The indications of the gods seemed very fruitful. There's a lot of Jesus was here, but I'd use the ninth degree to invoke Jesus. Isn't it a somewhat pedantic and British attitude to invoke all forces? Jesus makes a result of the devil. So I want to track all the peoples. In fact, he was that devil. His worshippers were burned alive, thrown to beasts, and so. Then that would be why he attracted the people who were born with highly respectable gods like Priapus and Venus. This should be fine material for the play. The fish, of course, is, in addition to its mercurial attributions, a primary symbol of Jesus Christ, which was first employed by the early Christians. This identification of the Christ of the Gospels with Mercury came as a complete surprise to Crowley during the Paris working with Victor Newberg. In the book of the Cephalodium working, Crowley wrote that the tarot trout drawn to represent the prime pentacle of the working was Atu 16, the house of God. In the Book of Thoth, 1944, a commentary on the tarot, and specifically on Crowley's own tarot designs, as executed by Frieda Harris, Crowley stated it may be taken as the preface to Atu 20, the Last Judgment. Coming of a new eon. The bottom part of the card, therefore, showed the destruction of the old establishment eon by lightning, flames, engines of war. Consideration of these remarks should assist the reader in interpreting chapter 7 of The Fish, the Hill, in which the blasting of the old Tower of Jesus, Tenedae, is symbolically represented by the lightning destruction of a tree, of which only the stump remains in a Golgotha-like setting. It may also be helpful to recall that according to certain Christian legends, the cross on which Jesus was crucified was fashioned from wood, from the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. It may be that the two trees that continue to flourish, albeit with acrid fruit on Crowley's Golgotha, typify the trees of life and of the knowledge of good and evil. Precursor symbols of the salvation and gnosis once promised by the blessed tree of the cross, the stump of which representing Egyptian and other sources of divine wisdom still intact. Blasting the Christ of the old eon was then the primary purpose of the fish. As will be evident to any attentive reader, bearing this in mind, it becomes possible to see the fish as more than a creative diversion in the midst of a magical working devoted to the Book of the Law and its comment. On the contrary, systematically interwoven with the common writings to which Crowley was devoting his energies, the same period as which the fish was written. Consider, for example, the following new comment to Cap I-49. This verse declares that the old formula of magic, the Osiris, Adonis, Jesus, Marsyas, Dionysus, Attis, etc. Formula of the dying God is no longer efficacious. It rested on the ignorant belief that the sun died every day and every year, and that its resurrection was a miracle. The formula of the new eon recognizes Horus, the child crowned and conquering as God. We are all members of the body of God, the sun, and about our system is the ocean of space. The formula is then to be based upon these facts. Our evil, darkness, illusion, whatever one chooses to call it, is simply a phenomenon of accidental and temporary separateness. If you are walking in darkness, do not try to make the sun rise by self-sacrifice, but wait in confidence for the dawn, and enjoy the pleasures of the night meanwhile. Now read the sacred words on the hilt of the dagger, used by one of the dwarf henchmen of those who eat the baleful fish known as Nazarene. Dare not to stand upright, dare not to think no, dare not to use thy might, dare not to face thy foe, dare not to do thy will, dare not to love thy mate, dare not to live thy fill, be feeble, fool of fate. Beneath, that's from chapter 4 of The Salesman. Beneath the surface satirical tone of the fish, Crowley was waging the Atu 16 war with a vengeance. In chapter 5 analysis, the Christian sect of the Plymouth Brethren, in which Crowley was raised and in which his father Edward was active as a preacher and pamphleteer, is dismissed by a mysterious editor who makes his one and only appearance in the novel at this point, as if Crowley could not bear the thought that the barb of his satire might not be felt here, as one of many fanatical sects fostered in supposedly tolerant Protestant countries. In the 9 chapters of The Fish that have survived, the major, indeed the obsessive, metaphor is that of the putrefying fish, all 4 of the members of the expedition to Abyssinia, who are otherwise quite different human types, shed a visceral, violent disgust for the Nazarene. In 777, Crowley outlined the symbolism of the Hebrew letter Nun. A fish is that which lives and moves in the water, which is here a symbol of death. It therefore indicates the forces of Scorpio, generation through putrefaction. It is through the eating of the putrid fish, Nazarene, that the wretched transformation of human souls is generated. And the ultimate goal of the expedition, at least at the point at which the fish breaks off, is to enter the pit, breeding grounds of the Nazarene, which name is spelled out in Hebrew, begins with Nun, or Nun. As always with the Crowley text, the levels of symbolism to be traced and meditated upon are manifold. For example, in chapter 5, our narrator, the good and brave clergyman Harry Towne, who has dared to taste of the Nazarene in the best spirit of objective research, the better to understand its nature, finds himself under its influence, angrily refusing to face the facts of life, started up at the intrusion of a thought about the meaning of fish, ancient religions, as explained to me once by a contributor to the London Punchinello, who subsequently disgraced himself in an unspeakably loathsome piece of abomination. The meaning alluded to here may be that of Priapus, the Ithyphalic god whose counterparts include the half-fish, half-man, god figures Dagon and Oannes, worshipped respectively by the Philistines and the Babylonians. In the Egyptian myth of the mutilation of Osiris by his brother Set, the phallus of Osiris, the only bodily part of her husband and twin that Isis failed to recover was swallowed by a fish of the Nile. Alternatively, the fish, a symbol of the Yoni, or Mons Veneri, can be found in numerous ancient cultures. It is noteworthy that the Egyptians, apart from the goddess Hat-Mehet, she who is before the fishes, and no deities in fish form, deities. However, the fish was regarded by the Egyptians as sacred, and a painting in the tomb of Kabaket at Deir el-Medina shows Anubis tending to the mummification of a fish. There are definite links between Anubis and Jesus, and indeed the term Jesus Anubis occurs in Greco-Egyptian papyri. Anubis was responsible for the weighing of the hearts against the feather of Maat, which has analogies with the Christian Last Judgment, guiding the soul in its journey to the paradise of Osiris, which is a further symbolical link with Jesus, who said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Both Hermes and Mercury are also associated with the role of guide, which is invariably linked with a journey through the sky or between the worlds. Connection is thus suggested with the Nuit of the Book of the Law. Such are a few of the symbolic meditative flights that may be stimulated with a sympathetic study of the fish. But enough of such fish tales. Let us now turn to The Fish as a novel intended for our literary delectation, an intention that Crowley most certainly harbored. C.F. Russell, or Frater Genesti, makes this point along with some others rather emphatically in his Znus is Znees, Memoirs of a Magician, 1970. You see, Crowley was first, last, and always an author. A literateur. With this always in his mind, is it any wonder his magic sometimes did not achieve his anticipated results? Now, haunting the happy phrase, modeling the merriest metaphor, even while fucking, he was recording the opus in his mind rather than endeavoring to establish ekagrata to effect samadhi. Like a professional magician deceiving destiny with misdirection, not realizing fate was his own higher self. Russell and Crowley did have their differences, and Russell was particularly sensitive to Crowley's explicit charge in the book of Cephalodium working that Russell was to blame for the failure of that working by virtue of having failed to initiate any Rashith ha-Gilgalim. That is, the initial turning or energizing of the spheres or chakras necessary to sexual magic. Russell, in Znus is Znees, has his own kind comments on Alice Crowley's sexual allure, and so forth. But Russell is acute, I think, when he points to the literary ambitions that flamed within Crowley throughout his life. The furtherance of Thelema and the laurel wreath of culture to claim were two possible motives in the writing of The Fish. The third may have been the badly needed money that a commercial success could bring him. Crowley was eager enough to appeal to readers of popular fiction, as evidenced by the lively demi-monde plotting of The Diary of a Drought Fiend. 1922. In the case of the fish, a possible inspiration for Crowley's plotline may have come from the vogue for tales of lost civilizations that had been triggered by H. Rider Haggard and his classic novel, King Solomon's Mines. The staggering success of this book is reflected by the fact that it has remained continuously in print since the date of its first appearance. Going off to a strange continent in search of a lost race was not exclusive to Haggard and Africa, as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle proved with his novel, The Lost World. Set in the Amazon jungles in the very period in which Crowley was writing The Fish, Edgar Rice Burroughs, the creator of Tarzan, was commencing his own rise to fame with novels such as Lost Continent, 1916. The search for ancient and hidden civilizations was in the air, and it is possible that Crowley, in search of a popular vehicle for Thelema, could not resist trying it out. A page of handwritten notes left by Crowley, see Appendix 1, the only surviving record of how Crowley intended to complete The Fish, indicates that after numerous harrowing adventures that claim the lives of Green and Thornley, not to mention the timely aeronautical aid of rebellious light bringing Lucifer, and a surreptitious diet of truth, will, and love, Lyle and Tone emerged victorious over the bottomless pit of Crees Needham. Had Crowley gone on to complete the novel, it might have been a corker of a story. Why he did not see fit to do so remains unknown. The Fish was intended to be not only a page-turning adventure tale, but also a satire. The jibs at Christendom, which dominates the surviving chapters, are free-swinging and often clumsy body blows, but they do yield fresh insights into Crowley's attitude towards Christianity. The Fish was hardly Crowley's first polemic against that creed. In poetic works such as The Sword of Song, 1904, and Why Jesus Wept, he attacked the philosophical absurdities and moral hypocrisies that he believed were entrenched in Christian dogma. In The Gospel According to St. Bernard Shaw, written in 1916 and first published posthumously in 1953, Crowley, drawing from The Golden Bough, researches of J.G. Fraser, sought to reduce Jesus to a fictional construct drawn from past dying gods of the Levant. Crowley could not bring himself to have done with his rage against the Christian faith, despite his own lines. In a sense, hypocrisies that he calls Christianity. Does that claim? As Sir Arthur Conan Doyle proved with his novel, The Lost World, set in the Amazon jungles in the very period in which Crowley was writing The Fish, Edgar Rice Burroughs, the creator of Tarzan, was commencing his own rise to fame with novels such as Lost Continent, 1916. The search for ancient and hidden civilizations was in the air, and it is possible that Crowley, in search of a popular vehicle for Thelema, could not resist trying it out. A page of handwritten notes left by Crowley, see Appendix 1, the only surviving record of how Crowley intended to complete The Fish, indicates that after numerous harrowing adventures that claim the lives of Green and Thornley, not to mention the timely aeronautical aid of rebellious light bringing Lucifer, and a surreptitious diet of truth, will, and love, Lyle and Tone emerged victorious over the bottomless pit of Crees Needham. And Crowley gone on to complete the novel, it might have been a corker of a story. Why he did not see fit to do so remains unknown. The Fish was intended to be not only a page-turning adventure tale, but also a satire. The jibs at Christendom, which dominate the surviving chapters, are free-swinging and often clumsy body blows, but they do yield fresh insights into Crowley's attitude towards Christianity. The Fish was hardly Crowley's first polemic against that creed. In poetic works such as The Sword of Song, 1904, and Why Jesus Wept, he attacked the philosophical absurdities and moral hypocrisies that he believed were entrenched in Christian dogma. In The Gospel According to St. Bernard Shaw, written in 1916 and first published posthumously in 1953, Crowley, drawing from The Golden Bough, researches of J.G. Fraser, sought to reduce Jesus to a fictional construct drawn from past dying gods of the Levant. Crowley could not bring himself to have done with his rage against the Christian faith, despite his own lines. In Ascension Day, the opening poem, The Sword of Song. No, on the other hand, the Buddha says, I'm surprised at you. How could a person accept my law and still use hatred? So means of ill, in truth's defense, praise of light. Well, I guess Buddha's are right. Of course, these lines come prior to Crowley's 1904 reception of the Book of the Law, and it may be argued either that Crowley came to regard the Buddhist teaching as arrogant, or that Crowley could not finally abide by the teaching. In either case, the vehemence of Crowley's vitriol transcends the storyline of The Fish.
Okay, I'm going to continue reading from The Fish. This is The Fish by Aleister Crowley, page 22. Page 23. One must be careful not to fall into the same simplistic tendency as shown by those critics who assert that Crowley was a hater of Jesus Christ himself. As the previously quoted diary entry for 9th of May 1920 evidences, Crowley regarded Jesus as quite as suitable for invocation as any other divine being. But Crowley's fundamental attitude is best stated in his own words from Confessions. I did not hate God or Christ, but merely the God and Christ of the people whom I hated. It was only when the development of my logical faculties supplied the demonstration that the scriptures support the theology and practice of professing Christians that I was compelled to set myself in opposition to the Bible itself. It does not matter that the literature is something magnificent, and that in isolated passages the philosophy and ethics are admirable. The sum of the matter is that Judaism is a savage, and Christianity a fiendish superstition. Stylistically, The Fish is an intriguing but uneven work. There are marvelously detailed accounts of the flora and topography of this imagined Abyssinia, as well as excellent crafted dialogue set pieces. And while Crowley demonstrated in the diary stylistically, The Fish is an intriguing but uneven work, the marvelously detailed accounts of the flora and topography of this imagined Abyssinia, as well as excellently crafted dialogue set pieces. But at least part of The Fish was composed through dictation, and while Crowley demonstrated in the diary of a drug fiend that he was uncommonly gifted at talking a novel aloud, in The Fish, the long-windedness sometimes shows. Still, The Fish has decided virtues. The richness of its symbolical interplay has already been discussed. In addition, it should be recognized that Chapter 5, aptly titled Analysis, is as probing a study as Crowley ever wrote on what he believed to be the psychological consequences of Christian faith. Further, the refutation by Lyle in Chapter 9 of the Life Pessimism of Green is a fascinating attempt at rebuttal of the first of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. As such, it is illustrative of the uniqueness of the spiritual emphasis offered by Thelema. As well, it shows the progression of Crowley's thought on this matter from the pre-Thelemic stance on his essay, Science and Buddhism, in 1903, in which the experiential aptness of the First Noble Truth is stated almost as a matter of fact. The Fish may be an overbroad satire, but it also has its depths. The four major characters in The Fish are stock types: Lyle, the sage white hunter straight out of Haggard; Tone, the naive yet devoted missionary; Thornley, the stiff-necked outsider Jew; Green, the scientific materialist and failed acolyte of Nietzsche and Darwin. Yet there is a bit of Crowley in each of them. Lyle is the Crowley of the days of Himalayan exploration. Tone, the Christian, shares Crowley's interest in drugs and scientific research, and also Crowley's conviction that humankind requires spiritual, not merely material sustenance. Thornley is a shrewd and unremitting judge of human capacities. Just as Crowley saw himself to be, and Green, for all his pessimism and despair, remains drawn to the vision of freedom and of universal harmony offered by Shelley in Prometheus Unbound. As was Crowley despite himself and despite certain cold-blooded and thus fish-like verses in Cap 3 of the Book of the Law, the chapter as to which Crowley confessed in the Book of the Cephalodium working a lingering repulsion. The Fish is rife with keys to the life, and thought of Aleister Crowley. Therein lies its principal fascination. Not to mention that a newly published work by Crowley, albeit an unfinished one, is in itself a rare catch. Rescued from the waters of obscurity, May the fish please the gentle reader. Lauren Sutton. The Fish by Aleister Crowley. Okay, that's been a brief reading, the introduction of The Fish by Aleister Crowley. This is Candidate John reading a book. This has been hashtag Wisdom NLP, Books and Wisdom.
This is ordained. Comment on that. I agree with you completely. While I share Roy's concern about the extreme bigots, Surah 929, why it was brought down. Let's listen to Ibn Kathir.
No, right? I want the verse. I don't want
Surah 929. And if you just want to go off the verse, it explains it even better. Because it says, fight those who believe not in Allah, nor forbid what they forbid.
Let me get the verse. Wait.
Yeah, and then if you want to go to historical context, Ibn Kathir is going to admit the only reason Surah At-Tawbah, ayah 29.
29.
Yeah, that verse was talking about me.
Exactly. And Ibn Kathir says that the reason why Allah sent that down is because the people of the book rejected Muhammad as a prophet and they just wanted to follow their own. Okay, I'm going to read. I have the tafsir right here.
Are you aware that in Islam we have a concept of treating the people of the book with respect and honor? And if anybody committed injustice toward somebody from Christianity or Judaism, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is gonna advocate for them on the Day of Judgment. Do you know that?
Okay, so hold on. If that's true, why don't you read your very first comment that you put in the chat? Like, why aren't you obeying your God? Like, the very first thing you said is, ain't no hate like Christian love.
No, Stop. Say Maria, just wait. No, stop. It doesn't matter. All you're gonna do, if you're either gonna bring up a verse that's contradictory, or you have to realize that Surah At-Tawbah was one of the last revealed verses, so is gonna be abrogated. And so when 929, the Tafsir Ibn Kathir says, therefore, when the people of the scriptures disbelieve in Muhammad, they have no beneficial faith in any messenger.
After that,
they followed their religions because this confirmed their ideas, lust, and the ways their forefathers, not because they are Allah's law and religion. Had they been true believers in their religions, that faith would have been directed to them, to Muhammad, because all prophets gave the good news of Muhammad. So this is why the verse was revealed, because we rejected Muhammad, therefore Allah said, fight them. That's why, listen to the verse. The verse doesn't say, just like in 9:5 it says, they broke the treaty, therefore you fight them. It gave the reason. And this verse, it says, fight them because why? They believe not, and they don't forbid what Muhammad forbids. So Allah's literally telling you, you're fighting people because of their belief.
Bro, Quran is clear. Okay, Quran is clear that. Okay, Sanaria, please. I mean, can you read the Quran in the original without translation? I read the Quran from the original. Arabic is my first language, so. You cannot argue about Quran better than me.
Because
So say, Maria, I want you to address what I said. Surah 929 is literally what they use to show that you can fight people.
Somali, can you read it in Arabic?
If you reject. Yes, you want me to read it in Arabic?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Qatilu alladhina la yu'minun billahi wa la bal yawm al-akhiri wa la Who? Well, yeah, see, did I? Okay, I've been reading it, right? All right.
Yeah, you're doing it right, Maria.
Spoiler. High five.
You know this.
Wilma already told me, though. Why you trying to, like... And while Crowley demonstrated in the diary of it, stylistically the fish is an intriguing but uneven work, the marvelously detailed accounts of the flora and topography of this imagined Abyssinia, as well as excellently crafted dialogue set pieces. But at least part of the fish was composed through dictation, and while Crowley demonstrated in the diary of a drug fiend that he was uncommonly gifted at talking a novel aloud, in the fish, the long-windedness sometimes shows. Still, the fish has decided virtues. The richness of its symbolical interplay has already been discussed. In addition, it should be recognized that Chapter 5, aptly titled Analysis, is as probing a study as Crowley ever wrote on what he believed to be the psychological consequences of Christian faith. Further, the refutation by Lyle in Chapter 9, The Life Pessimism of Green, is a fascinating attempt at rebuttal of the first of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. As such, it is illustrative of the uniqueness of the spiritual emphasis offered by Thelema. As well, it shows the progression of Crowley's thought on this matter from the pre-Thelemic stance on his essay, Science and Buddhism, in 1903, in which the experiential aptness of the First Noble Truth is stated almost as a matter of fact. The fish may be an overbroad satire, but it also has its depths. The four major characters in the fish are stock types: Lyle, the sage white hunter straight out of Haggard; Tone, the naive yet devoted missionary; Thornley, the stiff-necked outsider Jew; Green, the scientific materialist and failed acolyte of Nietzsche and Darwin. Yet there is a bit of Crowley in each of them. Lyle is the Crowley of the days of Himalayan exploration. Tone, the Christian, shares Crowley's interest in drugs and scientific research, and also Crowley's conviction that humankind requires spiritual, not merely material, sustenance. Thornley is a shrewd and unremitting judge of human capacities. Just as Crowley saw himself to be, in Green, for all his pessimism and despair, remains drawn to the vision of freedom and of universal harmony offered by Shelley in Prometheus Unbound. This was Crowley despite himself and despite certain cold-blooded and thus fish-like verses in Cap 3 of the book The Law, chapters to which Crowley confessed in the book of the Cephalodian working a lingering repulsion. The fish is rife with keys to the life, thought of Aleister Crowley. Therein lies its principal fascination. Not to mention that a newly published work by Crowley, albeit an unfinished one, is in itself a rare catch. Rescued from the waters of obscurity, may the fish please the gentle reader. Loring Sun. The Fish by Aleister Crowley. Okay, that's been a brief reading of the introduction of The Fish by Aleister Crowley. This is Candidate John reading a book. This has been Hashtag Wisdom NLP, Books and Wisdom. And while Crowley demonstrated in the diary of a stylistically the fish is an intriguing but uneven work, the marvelously detailed accounts of the flora and topography of this imagined Abyssinia, as well as excellently crafted dialogue set pieces. But at least part of the fish was composed through dictation, and while Crowley demonstrated in the diary of a drug fiend that he was uncommonly gifted at talking a novel aloud, in the fish, the long-windedness sometimes shows. Still, the fish has decided virtues. The richness of its symbolical interplay has already been discussed. In addition, it should be recognized that Chapter 5, aptly titled Analysis, is as probing a study as Crowley ever wrote on what he believed to be the psychological consequences of Christian faith. Further, the refutation by Lyle in Chapter 9, The Life Pessimism of Green, is a fascinating attempt at rebuttal of the first of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. As such, it is illustrative of the uniqueness of the spiritual emphasis offered by Thelema, as well as shows the progression of Crowley's thought on this matter from the pre-Thelemic stance on his essay, Science and Buddhism, in 1903, in which the experiential aptness of the First Noble Truth is stated almost as a matter of fact. The fish may be an overbroad satire, but it also has its depths. The four major characters in the fish are stock types: Lyle, the sage white hunter straight out of Haggard; Tone, the naive yet devoted missionary; Thorn, the stiff-necked outsider Jew; Green, the scientific materialist and failed acolyte of Nietzsche and Darwin. Yet there is a bit of Crowley in each of them. Lyle is the Crowley of the days of Himalayan exploration. Tone, the Christian, shares Crowley's interest in drugs and scientific research, and also Crowley's conviction that humankind requires spiritual, not merely material sustenance. Thornley is a shrewd and unremitting judge of human capacities. Just as Crowley saw himself to be, and Green, for all his pessimism and despair, remains drawn to the vision of freedom and of universal harmony offered by Shelley in Prometheus Unbound. This was Crowley despite himself and despite certain cold-blooded and thus fish-like verses in Cap 3, the Book of the Law, chapter as to which Crowley confessed in the Book of the Cephalodian working a lingering repulsion. The fish is rife with keys to the life. The thought of Alistair Crowley. Therein lies its principal fascination. Not to mention that a newly published work by Crowley, albeit an unfinished one, is in itself a rare catch. Rescued from the waters of obscurity, may the fish please the gentle reader. Lawrence Sutton. The Fish by Alistair Crowley. Okay, that's been a brief reading the introduction of The Fish by Alistair Crowley. This is Canada John reading a book. This has been hashtag Wisdom NLP. Books and Wisdom. Christian faith. Further, the refutation by Lyle in Chapter 9, The Life Pessimism of Green, is a fascinating attempt at rebuttal of the first of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. As such, it is illustrative of the uniqueness of the spiritual emphasis offered by Thelema, as well as shows the progression of Crowley's thought on this matter from the pre-Thelemic stance on his essay, Science and Buddhism, in 1903, in which the experiential aptness of the First Noble Truth is stated almost as a matter of fact. The fish may be an overbroad satire, but it also has its depths. The four major characters in the fish are stock types: Lyle, the sage white hunter straight out of Haggard; Tone, the naive yet devoted missionary; Thornley, the stiff-necked outsider Jew; Green, the scientific materialist and failed acolyte of Nietzsche and Darwin. Yet there is a bit of Crowley in each of them. Lyle is the Crowley of the days of Himalayan exploration. Tone, the Christian, shares Crowley's interest in drugs and scientific research, and also Crowley's conviction that humankind requires spiritual, not merely material sustenance. Thornley is a shrewd and unremitting judge of human capacities. Just as Crowley saw himself to be, and Green, for all his pessimism and despair, remains drawn to the vision of freedom and of universal harmony offered by Shelley in Prometheus Unbound. This was Crowley despite himself and despite certain cold-blooded and thus fish-like verses in Cap 3, the Book of the Law, chapter as to which Crowley confessed in the Book of the Cephalodian working a lingering repulsion. The fish is rife with keys to the life. The thought of Alistair Crowley. Therein lies its principal fascination. Not to mention that a newly published work by Crowley, albeit an unfinished one, is in itself a rare catch. Rescued from the waters of obscurity, may the fish please the gentle reader. Lawrence Sutton. The Fish by Alistair Crowley. Okay, that's been a brief reading the introduction of The Fish by Alistair Crowley. This is Canada John reading a book. This has been hashtag Wisdom NLP. Books and Wisdom.
Okay, this is Fish by Crowley. Traveller's Tales. It pleased the inscrutable wisdom of Providence that I should find my health so far undermined by my 11 years as a medical missionary in southwestern China as to leave me no option but to abandon those fields which my labors and hardships themselves had most deeply endeared to me. I look back through those seasons examining conscience, whether I had hidden my talent in a napkin. As to the worst As to the work nearest my heart, all our hearts, I hope, could reckon no less than 9 converts, 3 of whom I most confidently believe to have been sincere. The first, Ty Lewis, was the son of an English cotton broker by a Chinese wife. The father died while Ty was an infant, by his own hand, as the rumor would have it, and left Ty heir to all he had. I won his gratitude by making a paraffin bridge for his nose, fitting him with a complete set of false teeth, and curing an ulcer of long standing in his leg. He bore up against his suffering from poverty and disease with most exemplary patience and fortitude. And the last year of his life, cut short in early prime by chronic meningoencephalitis, was sinless as but few even of the most saintly could rival. He uttered scarcely a word but the name of his Saviour, and that constantly day and night with almost incredible devotion. The second, Wa Titsi, though sore stricken by Graves' disease, I had intended to train as a native teacher and evangelist. Unfortunately, his powers of expression were inadequate to his soul's development, and he could not learn to formulate any creed beyond John Wesley, all same God. But his life might put to shame many of far more elaborate theological equipment. His brain weighed only 2 grams more than the minimum hitherto recorded of an adult male. The third was my own cook and housekeeper, Tachi. To extreme personal beauty, she added the most engaging manners, and I refuse absolutely to believe the statement of my successor at the mission that she has backslidden and become the second wife of a wealthy pagan. The other 6, I fear, indeed, were but rice Christians. On the medical side of my work, I was more fortunate. My reports on the results of addiction to opium smoking are universally admitted to have contributed most greatly to the substitution of morphine injections for the noxious vice. My heart's hope was to find a cure for leprosy, and in this too I was more than a little successful. I found injections of tubercle bacilli uniformly specific, and am convinced that I could have reported every case as cured had not a mysterious disease new to science, which I can only describe loosely as epidemic phthisis, swept my hospital like a typhoon. One of my chief objects in returning to England was to convince the skeptical diaphoruses of Harley Street of my 2 discoveries, and to exchange views with the more open-minded leprographers. I therefore determined to cross the mountains to Burma and interview Major Ross of the hospital at Rangoon. This gentleman was most sympathetic, cordial, enthusiastic, and capable. He heartily endorsed my new treatment, which he had tried with similar success to my own, but my epidemic phthisis he had provisionally called Rost's disease, the harmless vanity of a very worthy gentleman. I left Rangoon in early January for Colombo, where I transshipped to one of the biggest of the liners of the P&O, homeward bound. On board was a famous traveler and hunter returning from a shikar in the jungles of Ceylon. We were mutually attracted, a silent comradeship natural between 2 men accustomed to live in solitude. The ship's gossip bored us. The bridge players disgusted us. The flirtations were too Australian for us. Shovelboard and deck quoits were to us both puerile and senile. Only one incident is pertinent to my story. At dinner, an argument sprang up on philology, and some pompous ass offered an absurd definition for Abyssinia. It comes from abyss, bottomless, Latin abyssus, genitive abyssi, and nia is the regular, adjectival ending for a country, as Romagna, Catania, Albania, and a host of others. After dinner, my friend resumed the subject over cigars, and to my amazement took sides with the windbag. This is his story. 2 years ago, I was in Somaliland after lions and pygmies. I know how to be intimate with most natives without losing their respect. I can play the heavy father, the arch-patriarch in a word. Well, of course, Abyssinia was almost the first country in the world to become Christian. Pastor John and all that. I don't know whether they have got him and St. John of Patmos mixed, but they are strong and long on the apocalypse. They told me Abyssinia is just what our mottle-faced friend said at dinner. The country of the abyss, bottomless place or pit, and that St. John was talking of an actual geographical fact, and that the lake of fire is next door to it, so to speak. I said that the apocalypse was only an obscure prophecy. They excitedly declared that the prophecy had been historically fulfilled, that the damned had actually been cast there 2,000 years ago, or nearly, and that they lived in torment there to that very hour. I naturally suggested a visit, and they as naturally expressed the utmost horror and fear. The subject came up again. I thought the yarn might be the fag end of a legend which was the smoke of a small fire effect. I got it. What really happened was that some tribes got leprosy from eating rotten fish, they thought, and were banished en masse like Israel from Egypt. Such tales grow to buggy size in no time. They come in handy for scaring babies. They get mixed up quite hopelessly. And you're lucky even if you get two elements coherent in a potpourri of 60-odd. The story half amused me, half saddened me. It was so like the garbage heap of travestied facts and fly-blown fables and swollen corpses of superstition and iridescent scum of romance that I had grown accustomed to, and had to grope in for the lost pearl truth. But the absurdity of the suggested etymology and the idiot's cunning of the dovetailed stories made me laugh. A thing I do most rarely. That may be why it's stuck in my mind. Or was it this? In England there had been a controversy with Mr. Jonathan Hutchinson as Athanasius versus practically all his colleagues as Mundum, in which the eminent syphilographer flirting with leprosy gave its etiology as ichthyophagy. Leprosy, rotten fish. Yes, it fixed the traveller's tale in my mind for the moment. In London, I hastened to pay my respects to Mr. Hutchinson, who was delighted to collate my Chinese facts with his own. He argued his case again. Aptly but unconvincingly, when he ended, I expressed a wish to suspend judgment. But look at the Abyssinian evidence, he cried passionately, and expanded, emphasized it with eloquence and ardor for nearly 10 minutes.
Nature does what it's supposed to do. The birds fly off, the seasons cause the leaves to fall, and then the flowers bloom, and just how beautifully orchestrated nature is. But not humans, though. They be fucking shit up and da-da-da. We weren't created. Think about that, though. Yes, it is a beautiful thing to stand back and to be observed and watch nature and how beautifully orchestrated those things are. That's what they were created to do. We weren't created for that. We were given free will. We were given the time, the space, and the opportunity to figure this shit out at the end of the day. And so when people hear someone like Ink say, well, I'm perfect. Ink is perfecting his life. Where we are stuck in a box and stuck in a construct and stuck in the general understanding as time has always been our focus. People that you push back and stuff like that. There's always been people that have been pushing back against the established order. If you really pay attention to discipline, the guardrails, if you will, the institutions, the fellowship, whatever it is that these things bring to a human life. But it is not my opinion that we were ever meant to get there, sit there, and stay there, and then wait for something that we don't even understand or know about to sweep by.
So I'll ask the question, but first I want to say that these are things you're talking about, like, or he wrote the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it's a lot of he said, she said, but at the end of the day, he did sign it. That is proof that he.
No, he said he did not sign it.
Here's the deal, Steve. If I may, real quick, and
that's what I was saying is
one need only read the original draft. There's two copies. We have Jefferson's and Adams' copy. They copied it from somebody. Both of them knew Thomas Paine from common sense. Every verbiage in the Declaration of Independence is all about Thomas Paine. I'm not the only one saying this, by the way. That's a fact. Joseph Lewis.
What's the fact about that? Like, how do we know that?
Go Google on the original draft, and if people stuck to the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, we wouldn't have needed a civil war because it talked about African people in the original draft. Nobody knows that, and they keep it secret from us, but it's a fact. Google the original draft of the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, I will Google that, and I will be back.
And then read African Slavery in America. And you'll find Thomas Paine is all over it. It's important to know that Thomas Paine is...
Now, if I see a lot of non-credited sources, obviously I would clearly come back and say...
Can we go back to the earlier conversation about like the requirements, please?
PDF, Lily. When you Google
thank you.
PDF, and there's all kinds of original books. They've already Google.
Can we go back to the other conversation?
Hey, hold on.
The one about the requirements.
There's a conversation being had right now.
No, it's not a conversation. You guys are just talking about who knows what. It's not relevant to the actual mainline. It's not important. You're just trying to like hijack our guys' conversation about the requirements of the presidency. Who cares about Thomas Paine?
Let me do that, and we'll talk. We'll open a room.
Yes, golly, horrible.
All right, well, tell you what, I have a suggestion. Hold on. Everybody except for Samoa, go on mute. Everybody except for Samoa, go on mute. Okay, Samoa, you're up. Unmute. Talk about whatever you want. Go ahead,
Steve, I want to hear your guys' opinions on like the requirements for the presidency. That was the main conversation that was happening, and now we're segueing into who knows what about what. Like, how is this germane to the actual discussion?
Yeah,
I'm just listening.
Do you think there's... I asked everybody to go on mute. Hold on. Okay, so Samoa wants to hear about the qualifications for presidency of the United States. We already heard Mark say that in Mark's opinion, you have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree and in political science, or you have to be in government for at least 2 years as a mayor. That's what I heard him say. I'll give you my opinion. In my opinion, I like the requirements exactly the way they are. I don't think there should be any change whatsoever. So let's go ahead. Anybody can unmute one at a time. Samoa's request, what should the requirements be to run for president of the United States?
Okay, I can go first if Samoa, is that okay, or is there someone else specific that
I am okay. What do you think the requirements to run for president of the United States?
Okay, I think that one of the main things or qualities that they should have or for a president is they should know, or they should have firsthand experience with struggling with whether that be money, mainly money, or just humble, just someone that's been through life hard that most of us are experiencing.
I mean, just imagine getting brain surgery, and the guy. Are you saying that you should have to have brain surgery before you can run for president of the United States? You gotta let me. Okay, no. I don't have to let you finish. Let's stay on topic. The topic is personal.
I'm pretty sure them boys ain't know that his
I told her like the second time. You really finna follow her? Bro, why the fuck is you?
Y'all is, yeah, get his dick right now, son.
What?
They called them for chasing that shit, Greggy.
The Fish, page 30, by Crowley. And expounded, expanded, emphasized it with eloquence and ardor for nearly 10 minutes. As I left the bottomless pit story, I jumped in my mind like a jack-in-the-box. I had no thought of it since the night I heard it. It shouted at me, distracted my mind from its many serious problems. It spoilt my dinner at Scott's. It played jokes on me. I began to murmur oysters, ophthalmia, lobsters, leprosy, cod, consummation, sole, scrofula, turbo, TB, mackerel, meningitis, and so on for all the fish I could think of. And then who should walk into the grill room but my friend of the ship? He didn't see me. He came in as if the devil were after him, grabbed a chair and a menu, snapped an order, and put his nose to a notebook. His coffee came at the same time as mine did. He relaxed, lifted his eyes, saw me, and charged me like a bull at a gate. "You're my man," he cried. "Fate's in it. What a damned unbelievable square mile of A1 luck. Glad you're glad. I was going to set every sleuth in London on your trail tomorrow morning. Rude to ask why. Remember that yarn of the bottomless pit there? I started. I see you do. Well, it's true, and I'm chasing around London buying equipment. And I need a quack who knows tropical diseases and won't jabber around the campfire. Well, there was no room for me in London. My mission was annoyed with me about one of my converts, a trifle. All of us do it. Damn interference, I walked out. I have my own little income, but not enough. I really wanted to know leprosy. My health was better. £500 and all expenses paid for a year certain in a new country with a man I liked. When do we start? He shook my hand. Good, 6 weeks from now, if the arrow's ready in time. The arrow? Only way to find that old BP natives wouldn't come. Ground evidently bad going, even for camels. The air gives us a clear big radius. We can build relay camps, or tout à la joie. We had no hitch of any kind. Lyle, that's his name. B. Lyle, B for Beale. Had letters of recommendation from, he said, a boss bishop and a baronial brewer. My frivolous friends say I must be out to introduce beer and Bibles. But so busy were we, both of us, that we were at sea before he found time to tell me what further facts I had turned his gossamer yarn into a veil worth lifting. It was simple enough. At the Travellers' Club he had met an old friend just back from Abyssinia itself. He had gone deep into the country. A singular event had occurred at a village called Nitty Ock. A man had gone mad, mutilated himself horribly, and fallen on all fours. Though writhing with pain, he interspersed his shrieks. With pitiful wails whose words contradicted his gestures and his tones. For they expressed pride and pleasure in terms of insane exaggeration. He wallowed abjectly and reproached and threatened the villagers for maintaining their erect attitude. He flinched, whining from all offers to help him, and snarled and spat at his own children and wives when they approached him. Presently he slunk away, still on all fours over the desert. The headman of the village restrained his family when they would have followed him. So singular did the explorer consider this episode that he inquired strictly into the matter. The man's disease was called Ji-Zuz, which means heart leprosy, or perhaps from within leprosy, because the bodily symptoms follow the mental. They say it is caused by eating a poisonous fish, which they call Nazarene. The cure is to eat raw lion's heart, but the victim can rarely bear to approach it. The venom of the serpent Nahash is an absolute antitoxin, and its bite is a certain and immediate cure. Bull's blood is good, but needs persistence for a prolonged period. The touch of a young child gives temporary relief in some cases, but rarely attacks the disease. As in morphinism, the patient's will to be cured is an important factor in the treatment. The tincture of the roots of the oak they call Elima is tonic and specific. Flagellation with gorse, briar rose assists the cure. So does massage, with either the golden oil extracted from the purple poppy or the sweet white oil that is sweated from red rosebuds or peonies. Moss held to the nose defends the patient from his own fetid breath. A diet of peaches or apples cleanses the blood. It chewed thoroughly and constantly, even in public. Sodom apples are the best variety. A decoction of orchids is much recommended, drunk either pure or with peach juice or apple juice. Others prescribe a banana on an empty stomach every night. Others again honey in the comb, macerated with milk. A third school orders oysters or mussels with white wine, but these are slow and only too often merely palliative. The drastic remedies are sure and swift, if the patient can endure them and is willing to risk kill or cure measures. Also, he is hard to convince that he is sick and suffering. He does everything by opposites. For example, he ransacked his folk or the immodesty of the retire. For example, he ransacked at his folk for the immodesty of the retire. His tribes dress as decently as archdeacons. Covers every inch of his head and body and limbs, save only just those parts which our archdeacons aforesaid, being surprised in the mutinal tub, would first claim the attention of the archidiaconal sense of propriety. Again, they denounce the most obvious truths as being lies. Thus they deny that the sun is hot. For how can so petty a thing affect so great a thing as themselves? Also, conversely, they welcome lies, however ridiculous, as truth, most especially when the lies flatter them, tell them that light shines from them, and that the sun reflects it as the moon actually mirrors the sun's. They will tolerate and patronize you, but if you approach, may bite you in the leg without provocation or warning. The most curious fact about this disease is that people find it. They do not say get or acquire or take or catch it. but only find it, accept it, or believe in it. This last phrase suggesting some local brand of Christian Science. All three verbs imply the free will of the person to become deceased. He eats the fish sometimes, the headman explained by a congenital perversity of taste, cretinous, scrofulous, luetic, imbecile, impotent, physical, and anemic. People often find the fish, as it were, naturally. To these people it is not so poisonous. Indeed, they often thrive on a daily diet of it, making their living by selling it, and are at least justified in boasting that they are cured of the diseases subjectively, for they take pride in the increase of their symptoms. This man at Nitty-Ock, case in point, bragged of his distressed heart, that it was palpitating with happiness. Many find jitsuzi in a mild form at puberty, unless the general health be very bad, and the constitution tainted. They cannot assimilate the fish. The fumes of its putrefaction usually produce a sort of intoxication in which they caricature the disease with its symptoms visibly exaggerated and obviously faked, though they take matters very seriously until the effects of the gas wear off. Such an attack protects almost always against the disease itself. At the decline of the reproductive powers, people hanker for the fish, which, despite the experience of centuries, is still by the vast majority held as is specific for all ills from poverty and ugliness to death and danger from ghosts. At the decline of the reproductive powers, people hanker for the fish, which, despite the experience of centuries, is still by the vast majority held as a specific for all ills from poverty and ugliness to death and danger from ghosts. This is because of the brilliant organization of the wealthy fisheries, their suave, smooth salesmen, the plausible publicity staff, and the work in the lobbies to force the fish on the people. Even those who vomit at the smell, being supposed to buy it, though they fling it instantly among their other garbage. But these all find it as a desperate clutch, at a straw as they drown in the dark seas of despair. Such, when women become bitter, when too thin, and maudlin, when too fat. The men, if fat, become sensualists and prosers. If thin, viragos and tyrants. But unless the people find the fish early in life and digest it completely, the symptoms are not so intolerable to the friends and neighbors of the patient. There is an epidemic form of the sickness which attacks crowds, but this is a mere simulation, transitory as other drunkenness. A few days, at most nearly all are well again. The disease attacks and holds most fiercely those who lack vital power, courage. Fear is the exciting cause in most of those cases which turn out badly. The man at Nitty Ock was pronounced hopeless by the head man. He has mutilated himself. He goes on all fours and eats dirt, they said. It is bad. He must go to Krees Nadum. That is the name of the place, they explained later, where the other heart lepers live. Kree means bottom. Bz means without. And Nudum hole in all bottomless pit. Lyle's friend asked for the location of this place, but everybody manifested a reluctance to talk. How would the sick man get there? Easy, filthily easy, they told him. One only has to follow the stench. Lyle knew he could reach Nitty Ock without much trouble. If the sick man could crawl thence to the pit, he could be sure of his goal. To make sure he would take an aeroplane with him. 3 months, 3 days after leaving Suez, we were camped just outside Nitty Ock. This is The Fish, written by Crowley. What Lyle wanted. I forgot to mention that Lyle and I joined the ship at Marseille, where we found on board our taxidermist, a little Sussex man named Green, and a young old man who looked halfway between a stockbroker and a pawnbroker, shaped from a retired pugilist. His name was Moses Thornley, and it was impossible to imagine what use he could be in our expedition, or what earthly considerations could tear such a man away from his evident preoccupations with property, ponies, and petticoats. I never met a man who looked so coarse and unscrupulous, yet many an ambassador might have envied him his reticence, many a captain of industry, his air of responsibility carried with ease and confidence. At Port Said Ali bin Daoud, a dragoman with a little staff of assistants to look after our cooking, transport and service generally, met us at our hotel, for at Port Said we had to change into a coaster. We suffered no more than the usual Oriental delays, the usual losses and breakages by theft or carelessness, the usual half-hearted threats of mutiny and palpably faked stories of family distress, with which one or the other of the native servants worried us when we wanted a night out beyond his means. The Red Sea was as stagnant and close as the canal itself. The ship was black with flies. At every wretched pretense at a port, we shipped new passengers, each time wilder and dirtier, jostling more excitedly and shouting more ferociously, finally losing themselves more suddenly in the crepitating mob of their fellow travellers. We had so hurried. I started the bulk of my preparation for my bacteriology, and to be done on the ship, so that I hardly saw Lyle, except at meals, when he never spoke except to pass the butter. Any spare time I had I put in wondering why so imperturbable a man should have started on so pointless a journey in such desperate haste. I'm fairly imaginative, many thanks to my lonely years in China, and I furnished myself with many a balloonful of explanations. But there was a leak in all of them, and that leak answered to the name of Moses. That ineffably tailored sphinx behaved like a polite stranger. He shook hands with Lyle at Marseille, compared physiological notes, and exchanged meteorological observations. The Fish by Crowley, page 37. I doubt if they spoke again till our first dinner in camp, when for the first time we all four dined together. Moses had dined at the purser's table and made an old friend of him in 5 minutes. We had been with the captain. Moses had lured 3 Anglo Indians from bridge to solo whist, and whenever they were not eating, they were playing. Even at the dinner party in camp, the Hebrew retained his aloofness in a way that would have done honor to Brahman, and my wonder grew on me like a boil. I thought, too, that Lyle owed me some explanation of our plans, but I was not the man to ask him. However, on the 4th night, he trotted in at sunset with a baby gazelle on his shoulder. He had gone out strolling alone for an hour, this invertebrate habit, ready for anything like the gun in the advertisement, from a snipe to a tiger. He got almost physically drunk on that gazelle, and when I remarked how good it was, he almost chanted, "I am back in Africa once more." It sounded like a school song, and 15 of his 50 years had gone from his face at the thought. It reminded me of the sea unwrinkling itself after a storm. His dull grey, cloudy eyes cleared, flashed, and laughed. The same image served. The incident seemed to break down his taciturnity. For the first time in my experience, he told a story at the table. It was a story of his early days, how he was chased by a gazelle. He had lost his rifle beyond recovery, and a wounded lion was looking for him everywhere, and it was getting dark, and he started back to camp. When he heard feet in pursuit, he ran like the wind and emerged from the jungle to his camp in the clearing. 20 yards behind him came a gazelle, who had possibly been equally scared of the lion, and possibly thought the flying man was its mother. It did not stop here. After our coffee, he suggested that we smoke our pipes in the moonlight. Thornley, by the way, had his cigar about a foot long, so pipes couldn't mean him. We went out to the top of a little heap of bare grey rock. I had noticed it before dinner. It suggested no particular form, but there was something about it indescribably evil. It was like a pimple on the great green slopes. To my medical mind, I suppose the idea of a cancer presented itself. "Know any geology?" said Lyle. "Scraps," I said. "Nothing systematic. I can tell chalk from old red sandstone and granite from schist, but not much more. I'm putting my foot on this rock symbolically," said Lyle. It was once a splinter, tall, sharp, clean cut, A landmark for miles around, a finger thrust up from the earth, but its own inherent rottenness has crumbled it. As it has fallen, it has crushed the life and fertility out of the earth around it, and every shower of rain washes from it a poisonous salt. See what a wide brown circle of death it has made. We don't know how far its putrefaction may spread, killing the life and beauty of the earth, and not even taking thereby any advantage to itself. He made a sort of snarling noise as he stopped short. Then he put his hands on my shoulder. Harryton, he spoke very seriously. I liked you from the first. I liked your quiet ways, your contempt for a humbug, your sense of humor. You have a brain and a heart hidden away somewhere. Environment has buried them pretty deep. God help you, but Africa may cure you. I think I've given you the chance of your life. You're on the trail of a new disease. Your query is abominable and terrible. That means fame and fortune if you can turn its tide. That's why you came out. But why did I come? And who is our inscrutable Moses? You've been dying to talk, and you've had sense enough to keep your mouth shut. But I can tell you now I'm not a doctor, but I know more medicine than you think, perhaps, especially about the brain and nerves. And I've studied every kind of poison. I needn't tell you that a new disease may count its dead by millions before you can organize any adequate defense. Think what the silly little bug of influenza did, and still is doing in the teeth of science. It might at any moment develop a more virulent form and run up another century or so before we got its wicket. The day after I heard that story at the club, I went round to Masters, the pathologist, and he sent for Button, the bacteriologist at St. Michael's, and our best diagnostician, Bartlett. We talked for over 6 hours, and then we cabled Johns Hopkins, as well as Rome, Paris, Vienna, and Berlin. A fortnight later, we sat in conference, some 20 of us. The danger about this bug is that it doesn't kill these heart lepers, as we may as well continue to call them. To someone rummages in Lytle and Scott for a longer and sillier name, the people have lived and bred for close on 2,000 years. Apparently, it isn't infectious or contagious, except indirectly, by a man who indulges in a rotten fish, inducing another to poison himself. But the world's waking up now. Suppose these trusts that run the fisheries, with their own government and God knows with what obscure international influences behind them, should start to make a market in civilization. It seems unlikely, being so localized for so long. But if it did get loose, who knows what might happen. Once in another climate, it might become infectious, even epidemic. The whole fabric of civilization might be swept away in a decade. Art, literature, science, philosophy, nay, manhood, and sanity themselves might be flung pell-mell into one huge plague pit of the earth. Well, to my story, we resolved to send a medical commission. We needed funds. We put the case before our government. None of them understood what we were talking about. We went to bankers, some of them philanthropists, who give thousands away to hospitals every year. They inquired with most acute intelligence into the symptoms of the new disease. They exchanged covert glances. They said they would give us the decision the next morning. They did. It amazed me. They would send out me to find the place, one doctor, to report on the alleged disease. Note the word alleged. And a man to represent their own interests in the matter. That is the mission of Moses. In plain English, they want to see which way the cat jumps, whether the spread of the disease would help or hinder them in their game of piling up pieces of paper with fancy figures painted on them. It is a fair sample of humanity. After all this civilization and progress, and our friend Ali seems to me a long sight better stuff. He broke off and spat. There was a silence between us for quite a long while. I finished my pipe and knocked out the ashes on my boot. He broke off and spat. There was a silence between us for quite a long while. I finished my pipe and knocked out the ashes on my boot. Lyle, I said slowly, I don't yet see why you should want to go, if that's the story. The cat's out of the bag, he replied. They would have sent Moses with someone else. I must match my wits against his. He's good as solo whist. I watched him, but I once beat Blackburn and I twice beat Pillsbury at chess. This is going to be chess. I'll cure these lepers. I'll make sure of the continued segregation. And I'll go for the cause and wipe this rotten fish from the pools of the earth. We can only live in stagnant water. So they say it's amazing that civilization has never yet secured a specimen. We'll find one, I nodded. There's another thing, said he. The more violent the toxin, the stronger the antitoxin generated in its midst. You know that. I'm just hoping that there may be some born in this bottomless pit of theirs who have refused to taste their fish, or happen to be immune to its poison. Such children might react against the environment with tremendous force, and be as much above the average human being as the others are beneath it. We ought to rescue those. Oh, there are wonderful possibilities. Let's get back to camp.
Name the 3 stages of a thunderstorm.
Beginning, middle, and end.
Close.
Is there an anvil stage?
No, I don't think so. I think it's something like forming, mature, and dissipating.
Alright, kind of the same thing, right? It's kind of what I said. No, it would actually be hilarious to just go through like METAR examples and try to get people to guess them, because they are.
Oh yeah.
They are nutty. I mean, you got to think this was
not that nutty.
This was when
really complicated.
you had to read it like through like a ticker tape or something like that. You remember the machines?
But you still have to be able to do this. I mean, you can. It's open book, so if you know where to look things up, you can look them up. But the problem is that FICON, as a number, by the way, is not listed in the FAR.
So it's not even well. But that's probably why they use that one as an example.
No, they didn't use it as an example. This was just from my scenario. This was actually a real notum from my.
Oh, this is a real life notum. Yeah, it wasn't like because I remember my examiner came with some paper like stuff. He had like some old like facts, like weather maps and stuff, and he pulled it out. He's like, "You ever see one of these?" I'm like, "No, not in real life." It's like, "Yeah, you'll probably never see one again." But we went over it and stuff. But he would ask me like, "What does this symbol mean? What does this symbol mean?" But he was very flexible. He was like, he didn't expect me to know everything. Like he was pretty good that way. I felt like my exam was almost like a lesson. Like it was a very kind of a learning experience in a way. Not for everything.
Mine was as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he was failing me, but he continued to educate me, like beyond the failure. He took some time and kind of gave me a class that was really good. Even though I botched pretty early.
I did really well on the oral. My written grade wasn't awesome, and because I remember him saying like, "Oh, oh, you know this stuff. Like I don't know why you didn't score better on your written or something like that. I don't remember why either, actually. But I don't think it was bad. I passed, but I think they give a report on like the type of questions you missed or something like that. So the examiner can ask you those at least those subject matters. It was a long time ago, so I don't really remember that well. But I remember him commenting like, oh, you know this stuff. And at the time, I did it. But, yeah, if I look at this stuff, I can remember and some of the stuff, but it's pretty obscure. Drizzle, snowflakes, snow grains, all these. The Inuits have.
The only non-Jew down there, including all of the Anons, is Kevin.
Oh God, that was so funny, and I actually truly was laughing so much about. I don't know, if I find something, even if it's politically incorrect, if I find it funny, I will just laugh, and that's kind of like a flaw that I have,
Welcome back, Roya June.
Yes, Roya June. Oh, Dan says, I was zoned out. Did I get a date? It depends, Dan. How old are you?
He won't say.
Is he in Germany?
Sorry, you were talking to me?
I'm not going to lie, but Mirage doesn't look like my father.
Oh, thanks.
Who looks like your
Which
father?
is funny to me because my father definitely wasn't Persian.
Well, maybe he actually was.
Nope, my father was fully a German Jew.
Maybe you were...
Okay, there is something my father never explained that is a complete mystery to the entire family, that we have some quarter Russian blood, so maybe...
No, he's not Russian. He's from Africa. North African.
Sorry.
Well, if it's Russian Jew, it's the same.
Yeah, that's what we don't know. He never talked about that, and we don't know where it went from, who.
Well, you look like your dad, my dad, so your son might be very handsome like me.
Thanks. I don't doubt that.
You have sons?
Me, I don't.
Well, actually, your eyes are very similar to Jeff's eyes.
Well, maybe we are related.
Is Jeff his son? Maybe
No, I would most likely be the father of the situation.
No, because Meraz, you're in your 40s.
But he looks like my dad, which is
40s,
weird.
So they
I
could
wouldn't assume he's in his 40s. I would assume late 30s.
Thank you.
No, he's in his 40s. He said he was 17 in 2000 something.
2000.
Oh, you did the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me
lazy.
Fucking math. That's funny, bro.
I still have time.
Well, did you miss the part where the average IQ in her country is 47?
Did you do the math for that? 47. That's horrible, Lisa. That's horrible.
I've got to find a picture of like that. It's actually funny.
Buttercup, how is your day, my friend?
I'm good.
You have been behaving differently lately.
What do you mean?
No drama.
It's all you, not me.
It's influence of Isa.
Isa has smoothed the transition a bit, but also I think also
Ambrose is ruffling feathers, so it makes me look more moderate. But we agree on every point. Like, we don't have any, there's no air between us. No.
You know what I like about you, man? Is just say whatever you fucking want to say. No one, like, it's okay. It's not like other people, oh, he's supposed that, I'm gonna kick him out. But, like, it's let people speak. Maybe they'll change their mind. Or you can change their mind. I said that I like what I like about you. You just let everyone say whatever they want to say.
I mean, it wasn't free. Like, I did pledge my loyalty to Queen Issa, Queen of the Jews.
No, she didn't. I mean, not everyone, because there are people that get kicked. But I think it's more interesting to have conversations, with them and try to kind of like expose their stupidity. I love doing that. Daniel loves that too.
I mean, there's people that comes with hate. There's
those I don't like. That just go like,
this is why
oh, you fucking idiot, you're gonna die. I mean, like, there's no conversation to have had with them, So
yeah,
like resistance. There's no conversation that can be had with resistance because he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
I heard he was Muslim.
Me? He converted.
No, actually, I heard he actually was Afghani.
What?
I think he's actually Afghani, based on his name.
No. He is Dominican.
That's what people used to say, but once he got doxxed, he's got, like, he's
No, I talked to him, and he kind of like, he speaks Spanish. I think I've spoken Spanish for him.
I mean, do you know what his real name is? Because I do.
No, I don't. But he sounded very, very Dominican to me.
Not everybody in New York.
No, but I know that the accents, our accents.
That's literally everyone in a good chunk of New York.
Yeah, I know, but there are a lot of Dominicans in New York.
Yes, and the Italians who live next door to them also sound Dominican to you.
I don't know. But, yeah, I don't think he's Afghani. He might be, but, like, there are specific things, in, like, the way they speak, the use of words. Hello? Who are you saying hello to?
Hello?
Hello?
They said I'm alive.
Hi.
It's Hawaii, actually, but hi, Buttercup.
Hey, love.
Hey, huh?
Kapara, Chaim Shali.
Why is Daniel get all the women?
I know, right?
It's not fair, bro.
He's not threatening. Okay, if you want to take it, if you want to take it in the ass, you get all the women to do.
Or just the tip.
No, Roberta, if you want to learn how to give a good blowjob, you can probably get all the women to do. It's fair. We all have that option. Daniel, I'm going to leave that for you, though. So I cleaned my Nespresso today. Distilled it twice. My next espresso should be extra delicious.
Hey, if you have a little extra money, what do you spend it on? Go.
I donated to
Donate it to the IDF.
Of course.
Donate it to the IDF.
Wow.
Fishes.
Have you ever really donated to the IDF? I always think that's so funny when people donate to the IDF. Like, they need us to knit their...
Checks to the IDF. Checks to the IDF. Version in a minute. Because the short version is that shit into 1 minute. I'm giving it. I'm literally telling you. Get the fuck out this app. Fuck their schools. Fuck their jobs. All that. What?
Okay, this is The Fish by Crowley. Chapter 3, page 41, our first case. Ardy Ark is a wretched, struggling village. A kind of outpost leading to nowhere in particular. 20 miles away to the west across an interminable sea of pebbles and scrubs rose a range of hills, yellow and red, with a dilapidated air. It reminded one of a gigantic street in process of demolition. No one had ever crossed them, or ever wanted to. The natives seemed to regard them a welcome addition to the scenery, on the ground that no robbers were likely to come from that direction. At any rate, they greeted our caravan apathetically, showed no alarm, no curiosity. They did not seem to want to sell us anything. They instinctively classed us with the masterless stray dogs that slunk about the streets, lean, scabby, savage, cowardly. I strolled through the village. There seemed to be nothing to eat. Their irrigation was haphazard, and their agriculture at the minimum compatible with living at all. They seemed utterly callous and hopeless, and in many of them I noticed serious symptoms of malnutrition. There was one boy in particular to whom I stopped to talk. He might have been 18 or 28, and he shrank at my approach in a very cautious, curious way. He was afraid, but not of me. It was more like stage fright. I offered a stick of chocolate. His eyes gleamed and every muscle twitched up with desire. But somehow he did not seem to be able to make up his mind to take it. In the end, he refused it. I went away toward camp feeling curiously irritated at the incident. After I had gone some 50 yards, I happened to turn around and found him shambling after me in an unusually furtive way. He caught my eye and slunk into a doorway. Just at the end of the village, it turned again and again. He had followed me. At this moment, my attention was altogether distracted by a spectacle. Altogether out of keeping with the forlorn appearance of the village. It was a group, no, a little procession. They were all fat, jolly, dressed in bright colors, and with a headdress not unlike a mitre. The leader was a sort of one-man band, playing at the same time tom-tom, a pair of cymbals and a kind of primitive horn. A lot of clashing tin discs were hung about his person, thus slightly increasing the discord. Behind him marched a tall man with the mask of a sheep over his face, and the tip of a wolf's tail dangling between his legs. He carried a gilt pole with a white banner on which the word for fish in the local dialect was inscribed. Behind him again was a woman, very alluringly dressed, and from a strap on her neck was a large tray containing a sort of mayonnaise with all sorts of brightly colored garnishes. She had a huge hoarse voice, and she bawled unceasingly the virtues of her fish. If you were hungry, or thirsty, or tired, or sad, a portion of fish would put it right. Fish was food for the brain. Fish strengthened the nerves. Fish took away fear. Fish was used by all the leading people of society. Look what fish feeding has done for us. She bawled with particular emphasis that the fish was absolutely free to anyone who would accept it. The manners of the country even permitted her to offer a further inducement to anyone who would sample her wares, and she indicated the nature of the bonus by a very varied series of gestures. Following her came a figure, intended to terrify, but which to my eyes appeared merely grotesque. He carried all sorts of arms, more than he could possibly use in any 3 battles. He wore a mask like a southern sea island demon. Behind him again, the last of the procession, almost hidden in the folds of his cloak, was a tiny dwarf, dressed in the most inconspicuous manner possible. Over his shoulders he carried a bag, almost as huge as himself. The attitude of the population to this procession was almost as indifferent as it had been to us. Without exception, they refused the fish. One elder, sitting outside his house, was near enough for me to catch his mutterings. Bad might it be, he said, and shook his head. The terrible accoutrements of the tallest man were apparently only for show. He raved and gesticulated, but nobody seemed particularly frightened of him, and he never proceeded to actual assault. All this time, my boy had been slinking up very stealthily. He was now not 20 yards away. The lady with the fish seemed to recognize in him a likely candidate, and took special pains to ogle him. He did not seem to care very much, but he wriggled and shuffled and fingered a little bag in his neck. The procession stopped to watch the duel. His nervousness increased, and so did her assurance. She lifted her plate right under his nose. At last he wearily drew his hand across his trembling brow, and then dipped it in the dish. He crammed the morsel into his mouth, and at that instant the dwarf ran out from the big man's cloak, clambered up the boy with monkey-like agility, and filched the little bag from his neck. He did not notice it. The leader renewed his noise with the vehemence of triumph, and the procession resumed its way.
Was who I was in my past life. So that could be a problem.
they can't deploy active to polling places. It's not the kind of law they're allowed to enforce. Their purview is very limited and sticks specifically to immigration laws and things surrounding immigration laws, like doing one's job without interfering. That often sticks there. So, while I understand my...
It's like, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't really get it. You know, like all the ways that you would speak in Farsi, they speak in English with a slight Persian accent. Yeah, I know. It's from the parents. And it's also from the fact that the entire community lives there. I mean, it's the highest population of Persians / Persian Jews in the world. So, I mean, of course, you can get around. Oh, not you. I was responding in the chat. That's why you can get away with not learning English for a really long time. You know? Yeah, it's totally different from Persians anywhere in the United States, honestly. You know what I'm saying, Rebbe? It's crazy that they have that Persian accent when they speak.
Crazy.
What's up, B? B2, B3?
What's up, B?
What's going on?
Living the dream.
Are you a Jew? I'm joking. I'm just checking. No, I'm joking.
He satisfies both columns.
You don't have to answer. I was just joking. We're just vetting everyone that comes in the room.
For no particular reason.
Train tickets. You said it.
I know. It was funny when I said it. When you say it, not so much.
You're being so big. You're a bigot.
I am. I'm okay with that.
Khaled said there needs more empathy and love in the world, and you're not practicing that.
Yeah, when you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. Anyway.
And with that song, I'm going to bed. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Roya June, your room.
Oh, damn.
You want.
Oh, I found a picture of my dad. Hold on.
Picture of your dad?
I found a picture of my dad.
Let's see.
After seeing the photo of your dad, I'm going to go.
Daddy.
Let's see if you and Meras are brothers.
Think I
Maybe your dad.
place.
Maybe your dad had a few travels.
Maybe. No, that didn't go to the right place. Why not?
Okay, this is the Fish McCrowley. Chapter 3, page 41, our first case. Ozzy Ark is a wretched, struggling village. A kind of outpost leading to nowhere in particular. 20 miles away to the west, across an interminable sea of pebbles and scrubs, rose a range of hills, yellow and red, with a dilapidated air. It reminded one of a gigantic street in process of demolition. No one had ever crossed them, or ever wanted to. The natives seemed to regard them a welcome addition to the scenery, and the ground that no robbers were likely to come from that direction. At any rate, they greeted our caravan apathetically, showed no alarm, no curiosity. They did not seem to want to sell us anything. They instinctively classed us with the masterless stray dogs that slunk about the streets, lean, scabby, savage, cowardly. I strolled through the village. There seemed to be nothing to eat. Their irrigation was haphazard, and their agriculture at the minimum compatible with living at all. They seemed utterly callous and hopeless, and in many of them I noticed serious symptoms of malnutrition. There was one boy in particular to whom I stopped to talk. He might have been 18 or 28, and he shrank at my approach in a very cautious, curious way. He was afraid, but not of me. It was more like stage fright. I offered a stick of chocolate. His eyes gleamed and every muscle twitched up with desire. But somehow he did not seem to be able to make up his mind to take it. In the end, he refused it. I went away toward camp feeling curiously irritated at the incident. After I had gone some 50 yards, I happened to turn around and found him shambling after me in an unusually furtive way. He caught my eye and slunk into a doorway. Just at the end of the village, I turned again and again. He had followed me. At this moment, my attention was altogether distracted by a spectacle. Altogether out of keeping with the forlorn appearance of the village. It was a group, no, a little procession. They were all fat, jolly, dressed in bright colors, with a headdress not unlike a mitre. The leader was a sort of one-man band, playing at the same time tom-tom, various cymbals in a kind of primitive horn. A lot of clashing tin discs were hung about his person, thus slightly increasing the discord. Behind him marched a tall man with the mask of a sheep over his face, and the tip of a wolf's tail dangling between his legs. He carried a white banner on which the word for fish in the local dialect was inscribed. Behind him again was a woman, very alluringly dressed, and from a strap on her neck was a large tray containing a sort of mayonnaise with all sorts of brightly coloured garnishes.
But a more considered opinion would be to say, if something like this ever did happen,
I got the shock of my life. The thing that happened next was incredible. My boy, his face smeared with the grease, staggered up to me and sputtered through his mouth of half-chewed fish. "Begone! Thou art unclean!" What could I do but burst out laughing? He broke into a string of abusive words. The situation was peculiarly awkward. It was, of course, the rule of the expedition never to have a row with a native, and at the same time never to stand any nonsense. I wished I had brought one of the Arabs with me. All I could do was speak to him sharply in a tone of authority. "Put yourself together." I said, "Be a man." He shrank back as if I had hit him, covered his face as if with excessive shame, moaned despairingly a man again and again, and a new excess of intoxication seemed to seize him. He gave a muffled howl of delight, dropped on all fours. In his mouth he caught the deep dust of the road like a terrier, playing with a bone, and the ensemble of the picture was not attractive to my personal taste. Frankly, I must admit that the suddenness of these incidents completely startled my self-command. I had not even offered to inspect the fish, which I had come so far to study, and I had utterly failed to associate the boy's conduct with his acceptance of the mayonnaise. I now realized that here was my first case observed, as luck would have it, even before the poisoning. And the best thing I could do was to try to get him to come with me to the camp. When I pondered, he groveled, still gloating with ecstasy, still reviling his neighbors. We discovered later that he had no family, thus no one was responsible for him. But I heard the old man say into his beard that he was young and would be better presently. The boy now began to revile me because I was not made as he was, or clothed as he was, or acting as he was. He waxed extraordinarily bitter over my erect position. I think that something in him prevented him from revealing the contempt he expressed, that he was in fact enraged at himself for not being perfectly drunk. He changed his note at intervals to praise of the fish. In the exuberance of his newborn enthusiasm really surpassed the more polished but more hackneyed phrases of the salesman. I tried to appeal to both sides of his insanity. I told him that the people of the village were quite unworthy of him and would not heed him, but that in my camp there were plenty to do exactly as he said, but they had had no opportunity of hearing about the wonderful fish. I think the fart button is what really makes all of this, slapstick, because you have to understand that this is like mockery. This is like reverse mockery, essentially. I'm mocking the mockery about mockery, but there's a lot of just ridiculous. It's just such a ridiculous book. It's very funny, especially about the epidemics or the pandemics. Hearing about the wonderful fish, and that he ought to go and tell them about it, no matter at what personal cost and risk, is a matter of duty. I added the fascination of a silver coin to that of my remarks. I really don't know whether he agreed to this, for he went on with his ravings, but he followed me, crawling on his belly and urging me to assume the only posture worthy of those glorious persons, the fish-eaters. I humored him by saying that I suffered from stiff knee joints, and as I turned to go on, he made a kind of quick wriggle at me and caught me by the heel to pull me down. I snatched my foot away and put 10 yards between us, and he crawled pitifully in my wake with his lungs bursting and his mouth now raving, now moaning, now laughing, now extracting the remains of the fish from the pockets of his cheeks and his hollow teeth, and champing it deliriously. In this fashion we arrived at the camp. I called Lyle out. I turned and saw to my surprise no less a personage than Mr. Moses Thornley. He displayed the usual cigar and erect expression on his countenance. I started in surprise, but all he said was, "The man that staged that procession had half an idea." this fashion we arrived at the camp. I called Lyle out. It turned in sort of my surprise no less a personage than Mr. Moses Thornley. He displayed the usual cigar and rapped an expression on his countenance. I started in surprise. But all he said was, the man that staged that procession had half an idea. I pointed sternly to the boy, who had momentarily collapsed from exhaustion. He said, it depends what you want him for. He's all right if you want to rob him or eat him. Not if you want him for your partner in business. It's the point of view. I snapped back at him. The boy happens to be my partner in the business of life. And I turned and walked into the tent without another word. I came out again with a case of instruments. I wanted to examine the boy. He had recovered, and at the sight of Moses, turned loose his tongue in that direction. But the point of view did it again. Moses rose to the occasion and gave a combination of concerted action between a boot and a riding whip that was really admirable in its technique. The boy cringed and shrank and sobbed. But the extraordinary action of the fish upon the brain entered a new phase. He kept on repeating, how fortunate I am, how favored, how superior. No one in any village a week's march all around could say that anything of the sort had ever happened to him. If you make the experiment of determining beforehand that you will use a form of inappropriate words in conjunction with almost any given gesture, you may be surprised at the difficulty of doing it. There was something unspeakably awful in the contradiction between the boy's words and his action. It suggested something so hideously wrong with the automatic machinery that underlies our limited conscious controls. Oh, what is this? What is the mathematician got a response for what's 1 divided by 0? Hello? Hello? I'm reading a book here, CM. Meanwhile, Lyle had rushed forward and thrust back the angry Jew. Don't you know, you fool, he shouted, that it's a blood insult? The boy will have your life, or all our lives. If he doesn't, his family will, or his village will. He doesn't look very revengeful, sneered Moses. These chaps have the spirit of wild horses. Bah! Said the other, with a mocking grin. I know more in a week of using my eyes than you've learnt in all your years of travel. But Lyle had turned aside and was ruminating. How the devil can we pacify him without insulting him? He muttered. He started as the boy moved and writhed towards his tormentor. Look out! He's got a knife! Roared Lyle. But Thornley stood like a rock. Lyle turned to me, almost staggered against me as he put his hand on my shoulder, and all his face went grayer than his eyes. I had myself been better prepared for what shocked Lyle. The boy was fumbling his hands at Moses' knee. He timidly touched the whip and put it to his lips. Then in a gush of excitement, he caught at the man's free hand and kissed it rapturously, while the tears streamed from his eyes. Thornley drew his hand away slowly, and then turned it palm upwards. The lad fell into an agony of distress, and beat his head repeatedly into the dust. When he glanced up at last, he saw the forefinger of that hand steadily pointed at the ground. His eyes followed it in a rapture of glee. He picked up the little silver coin that I had given him and pressed it into the palm of the Jew. Moses slapped it into his pocket, and with a kick in the chest, sent the lad over backwards. Lyle had mastered himself. His face was grim and deadly. Moses did not even look at him. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he purred. "I should like to write up my diary." "So that's what we're up against," said Lyle half to himself. I was bending over the boy, who no longer repulsed me. He had gone off into a dead sleep, but I heard the muttered phrase, "One swallow doesn't make a summer," I retorted. Sarah, welcome. "One swallow doesn't make a summer," I retorted. "This is our first case. We have no reason for thinking it typical. In point of fact, an old man of the village who has probably seen plenty of cases thought it a very mild attack. When we've lived for a month in the bottomless pit, if we live," interrupted our leader. "If," I echoed. "If we do, I think we shall be able to say we have seen something." I don't like it. The words came through my pursed lips. He swerved sharply as I spoke. "No, I'm not afraid." I flashed back to his quick glance, "But I'm damned if I like it." Chapter 4, The Salesman, page 47, The Fish by Alistair Crowley. At dinner that evening, Lyle was even more taciturn than his wont. He smoked his pipe of strong black shag between courses, as the Russian smokes his cigarettes. Thornley had excused himself from dinner, and would not even have refreshments sent into his tent. He could hear his pen scratching furiously. One of his most curious habits was that he stuck to the old goose quill and sharpened his own nibs with a penknife. He used a peculiar ink of his own, too, singularly rich and black. He had a series of folio ledgers made for him of very thick cream ivory paper, and he even carried a supply of sand to serve instead of blotting paper. He had dozens of little affectations and eccentricities of this sort, which he seemed to use for the purpose of asserting his personality, just as a more vulgar type of Hebrew sports ostentatious jewelry. Such trifles undoubtedly contributed to emphasize the aggressive individuality of the man, and incidentally to frighten weak spirits away from him. I had noticed on the boat how the average passenger instinctively distrusted and avoided him. Yet there was not one of these stigmata which was intrinsically offensive or even obtrusive. I thought I detected that his galloping quill was morally vivisecting Lyle. I thought of a very tired man with insomnia worried by mosquitoes. I could understand it well enough. Thornley's actions showed at what capital importance he rated the incidents of the afternoon. That it seemed to him urgent to all disregard of personal comfort that he should record his impressions while they were fresh, and record them in most meticulous detail. Lyle, on the other hand, was evidently both shocked and puzzled, and his pride gushed from 100 wounds as he thought with what contemptuous ease his enemy had outwitted and outfought him at every point of the duel. His distress increased visibly through the meal, and his appetite completely failed halfway through it. I thought that my bedside manner might interfere advantageously, and I remarked that despite the obvious debility of the boy before his poisoning and the disgusting and degrading symptoms, physical and moral, which followed it, it might well be that the prophylactic malaise caused by vaccination might be taken as a fair analogy. I pointed out that the salespeople were quite clearly in enjoyment of robust health, and carried on their business with vigor, efficiency, and enthusiasm, and that they were clearly on the best of terms with themselves and the rest of the world. Lyle replied by reminding me that these facts did not agree with his earlier information. I had hoped he would not have remembered that, and I pressed my argument for the illustration of a boy with his first cigar. He waved his hand impatiently and knocked out a burning plug from his pipe on the edge of an untasted plate of couscous. I grant you everything, he growled, but friend Moses knows where he is, and friend Moses is perfectly happy. I know less than I did at first, but when my enemy triumphs, I must put ashes on my head. We are well on the way to know, I cried I. We have a case to inform us, and we can cross-examine that procession and buy some of that fish and turn the searchlight on it. Don't worry. In another 24 hours, I will bring up artillery to support you. Moses, after all, has only bow and arrows. The explorer seemed to pluck up courage at this. Science always wins, he said. Knowledge is always power. But you know better than I what tempests savage the frame. When the frame is too weak, was my riposte. But history is in the witness box. A spark lurked somewhere in the darkest ages. Presently, the tongue of flame leapt forth in Florence, in Oxford, in Smithfield, in Geneva. Everywhere. The candles of Ridley and Latimer were never put out. The flame survived. The latter-day tempests have fanned it and spread it. The world is ablaze and the shadows have fled. I picked my clinical thermometer from my waistcoat pocket. Here is my witness. I said, we have learned to measure things. We insist that all things should be measured. We have established the unknown God and made him known, and his name is geometry. That is the victory of the Freemasons. Our pastoral staff is Franklin's lightning rod, our chalice a barrette, our sword a dividing engine, and our disc a galvanometer. The simplest necessities of life have come to depend on science. To go back to guesswork is as impossible as to go back to the jungle. Lyle shook his head. I can imagine a lecturer employing similar eloquence in Nineveh, Babylon, Tyre, the ruined cities of Ceylon. Why, man? Science itself tells you that all growth is a curve, all action a reaction. What came from nothing must go back to nothing. Our civilization is only a sort of skin disease to which the earth is subject. A boil that swells and bursts and leaves a scar scarce visible. I sprang to my feet in irritation. This is simply morbid. I said, quinine and caramel for you, and mixed them a dose from my pocket case. Here, swallow that, I said, and don't let abstract speculations unfit for your daily duties. Come and look at our patient. I had put the boy on a camp bed in my sleeping tent, where he lay in a state almost resembling coma. The lighting of the lamp seemed to rouse him. His state changed to one of low-muttering delirium, in which one could only make out ecstatic phrases, interspersed with groans. It was sleep's imitation of his waking mania. His temperature had dropped, and he had sweated profusely. His eyes were wide open, the pupils fully dilated. In fact, all his reflexes had relaxed. The breath was exceedingly foul, and the nostrils were running profusely. I resolved upon decisive measures, injected a full dose of strychnine and digitalis, plunged him in a cold bath, and resorted to vigorous massage. In the course of an hour, he recovered consciousness, and I was able to administer a cup of strong meat broth fortified with iron and wine. He reacted so admirably to these measures that I determined to continue them throughout the night. By morning he seemed to have shaken off the poison completely, and even to possess greater physical strength and moral stamina than when I had first accosted him. His mind was very confused. He did not seem to remember what he had been through, but in other respects his sanity and balance left nothing to be desired. He was able to take some solid food for breakfast, and then I told him to go home and not to eat any more fish. Now came an incident comically curious, which delighted both myself and Lyle, who was outside his tent putting together the parts of our aeroplane. I had said goodbye to the boy, who shook my hand with a manly warmth and vigor, which testified to the gratitude which he felt, and had no touch of civility. It turned to go, but had only covered a few yards when he was intercepted by Moses Thornley. The eyes of the latter lighted up with cruel and contemptuous joy. He deliberately dropped his cigar and motioned to the boy to pick it up. My patient took no notice and stepped aside so as to pass by. Thornley, with a look of angry surprise, planted himself again in the boy's way and ordered him gruffly to pick up the cigar for him. He turned back and did so, but with a glance and a gesture that would have warned a less confident bully.
Element. Order takers and trying to, just do what the president wants to do. And we're seeing that even in the Epstein file kind of a thing that they wouldn't even try. I mean, they tried to say that it wasn't, there's nothing to investigate. And even with the pictures that, if people, I'm not going to talk about Epstein. And even when people are telling you there's, pedophilia was happening there, and here are the pictures. The people on the pictures were not, there's nothing to investigate here. And Todd Blanche said, well, partying with a known pedophile in a pedophilia ring, I mean, that's not his words, but he said, partying with Epstein is not in itself a crime. But for sure, you got crimes that happened there, and you got pictures of the people that perpetrated these crimes. Doesn't that at least invoke maybe we should investigate? No, the answer was no. My last thing is the Democrats must be the stupidest cheaters ever, because if they cheated in all the stuff that Trump is accusing the election cheat, I mean, we wouldn't have a Republican president by now. We wouldn't have a Congress that's being ruled by the Republicans. I don't know why we cheated. We cheated, and we ended up in a position like this. I looked at an article by the Brookings Institute about election fraud, and the amount of time that they, investigations showed, fraud. In Florida, where I live, there were 9 cases of election fraud between 2020 and 2022. Most of them were committed by people who were confused, or if they had the right to vote. That's in 2 years. There are some numbers in there about Texas that had since 2005. I got the shock of my life. The thing that happened next was incredible. My boy, his face smeared with the grease, staggered up to me and sputtered through his mouth of half-chewed fish. Begone! Thou art unclean! What could I do but burst out laughing? He broke into a string of abusive words. The situation was peculiarly awkward. It was, of course, the rule of the expedition never to have a row with a native, at the same time never to stand any nonsense. I wished I had brought one of the Arabs with me. All I could do was speak to him sharply in a tone of authority. Put yourself together. I said, be a man. He shrank back as if I had hit him, covered his face as if with excessive shame, moaned despairingly a man again and again, then a new sense of intoxication seemed to seize him. He gave a muffled howl of delight, dropped on all fours. In his mouth he caught the deep dust of the road like a terrier, playing with a bone, and the ensemble of the picture was not attractive to my personal taste. Frankly, I must admit that the suddenness of these incidents completely startled my self-command. I had not even offered to inspect the fish, which I had come so far to study, and I had utterly failed to associate the boy's conduct with his acceptance of the mayonnaise. I now realized that here was my first case observed, as luck would have it. He had the best thing I could do was to try to get him to come with me to the camp. When I pondered, he groveled, still gloating with ecstasy, still reviling his neighbors. We discovered later that he had no family, thus no one was responsible for him. but I heard the old man say into his beard that he was young and would be better presently. The boy now began to revile me because I was not made as he was.
He put the cigar in his own mouth, took 2 quick strides toward his tyrant, and struck him square on the jaw. Thornley went down like a felled tree. The boy walked calmly over his body and went off to the village with the springy step and high held head of youth. The Jew picked himself up in a dazed fashion, but instead of pursuing his assailant, slunk cringingly into his tent. When I went in to see if he was hurt, I found him crouched behind his bed, brandishing a pair of revolvers. He rebuffed my inquiries growingly, and I went over to Lyle disgusted. Our leader had been watching the scene radiant. He seemed absolutely renewed by the incident. We exchanged a few sarcasms at the expense of the banker's agent. Lyle replied emphatically that he had been sure that the boy's blood and race guaranteed his spirit, that the poison could not take hold on anyone that was not already cachectic from some deconstitutional taint. Leucocytes, he shouted. Fresh air, sunlight. Obstinence. There lies our surety. I agreed with him heartily, but pointed out that the incident rather complicated a puzzle than otherwise. Just so, said he cheerfully, but you can't hope to put a puzzle together until you have got all the pieces, and up to that point, every new one makes it look more of a muddle. Come up to the village, said I. Let's try and locate the procession. But even as I said the words, the air was insulted by the distant pandemonium of the one-man band, and we could see the banner jerked up and down over the mud wall of the village. 3 minutes later, it was evident that the salesmen intended to canvass our expedition. On they came jauntily, swinging with lusty strides, their grotesque braveries gory in the raw sunlight against the dusty orange ochre of the horizon. We heard Ali shouting vehement orders to his Arab staff, who ran up with their rifles slung from their shoulders, cracking their rhinoceros-hide whips. The 2 biggest seized the head man, who was also the contractor, and our gang of carriers, and told him that he should pay with his skin for any breach of discipline among his men. He took this Gentile hint as seriously as it was given. He got his men ranged up in first-rate shape, and treated them to a series of barks and yells which we took to mean that he would stand no nonsense. Ali himself headed off the procession as it approached, and his Arabs covered it with their rifles. The salesman wheeled, then Lyle and I ran up and told Ali that we wished to talk with them. The Arab gave way rather grudgingly. He washed his hands of his mad English masters, as one might say. The procession halted and began to go through the regular performance. I explained to the woman that I did not want to take her fish for nothing, that I would pay her price. It was as if I had not spoken. She merely urged me to eat, and that with the most fantastic eagerness. She actually foamed at the mouth, and the sweat streamed from her face, her wrinkles inspected with rivulets of miry paint. She was obscene and nauseating. I had provided myself with a box of tin lined with glass for the reception of the specimen which I proposed to analyze. This I took from my pocket, and proceeded to fill it with a platter. The action seemed to anger her. "No, no," she screamed. "You must eat it at once. Eat, eat." I told her very politely that I had just had my breakfast, and added a remark in perfect innocence, whose effect I could hardly have foreseen in a nightmare. "I don't want it to eat." I said I only wanted for scientific examination. The hag went into convulsions, uttering the most fearful screams, and on the instant the dwarf ran out from under the cloak and addressed his companions in sharp, short tones of command. The malice and fierceness utterly inhuman, and evidently pushed to a pitch of what seemed to me almost insane intensity by some inexplicable but most soul-staggering fear. His manner left no doubt that he was the real leader of the gang, that the others were merely his hirelings. Never in any freak museum have I seen so ghastly a deformity. One asked oneself how nature could have come to a mood of such perverted madness as to dream so grievous an abortion. He was about 4 feet high, his arms so long as nearly to touch the ground. They seemed immensely strong, and the hands were enormous. I never saw bigger or as big on the heftiest lumberman. The nails were strong and sharp, almost like the claws of a hyena or of some carrion bird, and the fingers were gnarled and knotted like an old sailor's. The thumb was extremely short, crooked, and appeared to be of only one phalange. Splayed feet with practically no instep terminated short, thick legs, whose bones were curiously twisted. So broad were the hips, and so narrow the shoulders, that the body was shaped like a fig. The paunch was immense and distended. The spine was curved almost to the arc of a circle, and the head was set on the shoulders, or rather between them, with no visible neck. The skull was immense and hideously misshapen. Ragged wisps of long grey mangy hair were matted on a scalp of parchment-like ochre, with blotches of black scab that suggested the inscriptions of some dead evil race. A dirty white beard struggled meagerly from the sharply jutting chin. I thought of the ram of a warship. The mouth was long and straight, with lips so white, so flat, that they could scarcely be distinguished. The teeth were like a wolf's, but black and rotten. Scraps of raw meat, sticking in the gaps, showed red against the brown of the swollen gums, whose edges oozed with pus. The nose was eaten away, apparently by lupus or by a rodent ulcer. The cheeks were fallen and wrinkled, their skin dry and dull like a rotten orange. The forehead was receding, the whole face prognathus. In fact, but enormously bulged on the left temple and caved in on the right, the dome being thus a sort of skewed cone. The eyelids were raw red, the eyes were black. They were covered with a film, a whitish, yellowish membrane. Greed, cunning, malice seemed to incarnate in the expression. I was able to observe him, or more accurately, it with great exactness. For in his furious scurry, his black hooded cloak had fallen off, and he pranced naked in the sunshine. Naked, except that about his trunk, beneath his arms, a broad iron ring was welded into this by a short, heavy chain, was riveted the steel box in which he stored his gaze. I only caught one word of his frenzied jabberings, my one word examination. But his psychology was as obvious as his anatomy. I can perhaps best convey it by saying that it was as if a very pitiful coward had been lulled into security, and then most suddenly confronted with his fear, an anguish so intense that it surpassed itself and makes him fight instead of turning tail. The noise, as I suppose, had attracted Moses to our group. I saw him just behind the dwarf. He was standing alert and resolute, quick, anxious eyes and nostrils widely dilated. "Look out, doctor!" he shouted. "Get to cover, they mean mischief." I am so slow and stupid, so unable to grasp unsympathetic psychologies, that I simply failed to understand. I was bewildered utterly by this senseless storm in a teacup. But the dwarf's men took weapons from the surplus of the boogeyman and scattered so as to surround me. Even the woman threw down her platter and caught up a rope, painted to represent a snake, While I stood there gaping like a gaby, she flung a noose round my legs and brought me heavily to the ground. The others with whoops of triumph rushed at me. They battered me. They stabbed me. They trampled me. Luckily, it was only for a moment. Thornley, with great presence of mind, threw down a handful of coins, and my assailants turned to scramble for them. "Get to cover, you damned ass," he yelled, and this time I knew my lesson. I crawled as best I could to my tent and began to count my wounds. By this time, Ali had seen what was wrong. He and his Arabs formed line and charged with drawn scimitars. Salesmen did not wait for the attack. They fled in disorder, leaving most of their apparatus on the field of battle. The leader had disappeared long since. He was inconceivably quick on his feet, awkward as they looked, and he had the trick of silence in withdrawing. It was as if he had slipped suddenly into the earth, the swift stealth of the scared lizard. In his rage, our head man ordered all these things to be piled up and burnt, which was a pity, for some of their finery was really rare and valuable. There were old and irreplaceable things among them, and apart from their intrinsic worth, they would have been of inestimable service to me in certain phases of my investigations. Lyle, by the way, had come off nearly as ill as I, for at the first onset the dwarf had stabbed him in the thigh with a little crooked dagger, which proved to have had poison on the blade. It was an innocent-looking toy constructed cunningly of glass, cloudy white and very brittle. The hilt was shaped like an owl, perched, so to say, on guard, which was a crescent moon. It had on it a sacred verse bitten in with some acid. I may translate this roughly as follows. Scar thy skin, eat thine heart, fog thy brain, drink thy tears, shrink with shame from all thou art, breathe but lies, feed on fears. This is thy duty, man. This is God's perfect plan. On the hilt with these words in a spiral scroll, I translate once more. Dare not to stand upright. Dare not to think or know. Dare not to use thy might. Dare not to face thy foe. Dare not to do thy will. Dare not to love thy mate. Dare not to live thy fill. Be feeble, fool of fate. His daggers are manufactured wholesale, as we learnt later in the bottomless pit in the section called Akaratsya, which word means, so they say, innocence or purity, but it is evident from the etymology that it originally meant lack of power. By a similar process among ourselves, the Greek ascetic or trained athlete has come to signify a physically starved and stunted person. The self-denial with an object of the man in training became valued for its own sake as a virtue. Virtue itself, again, really means the quality of manhood. Yet we now use it too often of qualities possibly angelic, but by no means manly. The poison is the natural juice of a flowerless weed that grows on the slopes above Akratia. They call it poetically enough, path, nor, ya, river of chastity, or etymologically the white that flows, and claim that by rubbing the body with it daily, night and morning, they are immune from practically all the ills of life. But I anticipate my story. Lyle was very severely... Okay, we'll come right back to that. Lyle was severely infected by this venom. He relapsed constantly in spite of all I could do. The symptoms were nervousness, exhaustion, anemia, fainting spells, cardiac weakness, headaches, and hypochondria with delusions of persecution. Only his constitution pulled him through. I had just finished dressing my wounds when I heard the steps of Thornley. He came to inquire how I was. He made himself at home in my tent with quiet assurance, mixing himself a drink, settling down apparently for a long conversation. "Doctor," he began, "I don't talk much, but when I do, I have something to say. You don't like me, you don't trust me, you don't understand me. Don't wriggle, I know. What's more, you never will. It doesn't matter. We can get on well enough, that's the point, if we make a little deal, eh?" "What about?" I said rather shortly, for I ached all over and wanted to rest. "About your research. Let me say straight off I'm with you. I never knew harm come of knowing too much, of too little, all the harm there is in the long run. I'll give you some facts here and now, not science perhaps, but useful for all that, or I miss my guess. Firstly, I've got into the business side of this fish graft. Those salesmen are never allowed to touch it, on pain of losing their jobs. They'll give a fish addict a job now and then when it suits them to advertise, "Come where the booze is cheaper," traction of the product, or need to demonstrate sincere enthusiasm, or a marvelous recovery from sickness, and so on. But they cure the new man by slow stages. Often he never really got it in his system, and he is taught the art of salesmanship in the regular way. There's no doubt about the effect of the fish. I've collected some samples for you, by the way. It's a foul poison of the dope species. It softens the brain and hardens the heart and corrupts the blood and destroys the reproductive faculty. Its use turns a man into a sniveling, lying, slavish rogue without self-respect, courage, wit, or any of the generous emotions. You certainly seem to have found out a lot. I came out here to report to my principals. There's more yet which you may as well know. I found out where the fish is bred, and I'm going to take you to see it. Meanwhile, let me give you a hint. Nothing frightens people so much as inquiry. You've had a lesson today. Go on with your work, but let no one know what you're doing. I have a soft spot in my own skin, too. I can't afford to have anyone know that I'm helping you. That's all, I think. But when you've analyzed that fish, I should like you to tell me about it. I promised gladly enough, and we shook hands for the first time since our introduction. He went out of my tent, and I sank into a sleep, which was peopled by dreams of the most fantastic order. But underneath the whirling images of my fancy, there was a dull ache of resentment against the darkness and confusion. I yearned for the clear light of day, and for an universe ordered and intelligible. Analysis. Okay, we're gonna stop here. It's a lot of reading. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. We've been reading The Fish. Got a lot of edits here. Valued for its own sake as a virtue. Virtue itself again really means the quality of manhood. Yet we now use it too often of qualities possibly angelic, but by no means.
against what the administration is doing. That is really very, very unfortunate. But so I think what are the choices for the regular people, for voters like us? I don't know. I think for me, the best chance is to hope that some decision will be obeyed by the administration if it's ruled job to unconstitutional actions taken by the administration, whether it's due process or whether it's any other freedom of speech, etc., etc. That's certainly just wishful thinking. It really just shows the fragility of our constitution, of our system. I used to tend to believe that it's an ironclad system. It just takes one of the three branches to do its job. Now I realize that if we have a hooligan in one of the branches, which in my mind is this administration, then the other two branches, there's not that much they can do to actually rectify the situation. So other than that, I don't have a lot of positive things to say. But the way the duty, the problem is you, Gary, picking such a terrible, heavy topic, like a hopeless topic. Maybe we can talk about something else, like your.
Well, I missed the suggestion because you were underwater for that, but I'm open to all suggestions on topics for us to use. But, you mentioned court orders not followed by the administration. And Breyer also mentioned that a federal judge, who was a Republican-appointed judge, admonished the administration for not following court orders. He gave a number. Do you know how many court orders he said were not followed thus far by this president? More than that. Michaela, followed by Umis.
Half of my family's from Nebraska and the other half from Minnesota. So most of them are Catholic Democrats, but a lot of them have left the party because of big pro-life issues. About the elections, I think that maybe the federal government could have a legitimate part in helping the states. That CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, I think that's what it's called. They look at voting systems and point out vulnerabilities, but they have no power to enforce any of what they found. It's up to the states to do that. And they did find vulnerabilities in Dominion in 2022. It's not. There's no evidence. They didn't say there was any evidence that those had been exploited. But I do think that the federal government should have a role there. And I think some of their suggestions were that all of the parts of the voting systems be manufactured in the U.S. And I would go for that.
Because anything that was manufactured outside these states is subject to tampering?
Well, that we could have more, oversight over it.
I would
legal oversight.
But you're making that recommendation without there being any evidence of there being any problems, right?
Yeah, but we wouldn't know because we wouldn't have oversight. We wouldn't have laws that they'd have to comply to,
I'm sure there's oversight, and I'm sure there are laws that they have to comply with. But
That's one of their suggestions.
So let me give you an example. It's nothing to do with elections. The federal government has certain safety standards and EPA standards that auto manufacturers must adhere to. If your car is imported from Germany, do they still have to follow those standards and regulations?
I suppose so, but I don't know. That was one of their suggestions.
Yeah. Okay.
Suggestions. Yeah.
Okay.
They must have had a reason for it.
Okay. Thank you, Michaela. I appreciate that. Hermes, you get the last word. Hermes?
Yep.
Last word, buddy. Last word, buddy. Don't blow it.
No. So, there's not much to say. Everything that needed to be said has been said. And I just hope that, we can change things and turn things around and heal our country. Thank you, Gary.
I love ending on an optimistic note. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow, for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
Music, where he oversaw day-to-day operations. Pugh had previously overseen the label's promotion and marketing strategies as Executive Vice President of Urban Music and is credited with leading Epic's urban team to great success, including becoming #1 urban record label of the year of 2017. Preceding that role, Pugh was Senior Vice President of Promotion at Universal Music Group's Island, Def Jam, where he helped propel Rihanna and Kanye West to stardom, among many others. After a near-fatal car accident in 2014, Pugh had a desire to tell his story. Pugh was previously Vice President of Promotions at MCA Records for 7 years and launched his career as Regional Promotional Manager